So we are taking up today employees compensation insurance. I hope everybody is comfortable in English, or you want me to speak in Hindi? It's okay with all? Okay, thank you. So say some facts about this insurance. In fact, workers' compensation insurance, what it was earlier known as, it protects employers and organizations against lawsuits related to employees' injuries. Means by nature there are three parties. It can be more than three, hundreds, more than hundreds. But it is not two-party agreement. Insurer, employer, and the workers. The insurance act as the safety net for both the employees and the employers. Insurance means this policy acts as the safety net, because this is a statutory liability. Many policy providers provide coverage for temporary and contract employers too. Now, workmen's compensation insurance covers death benefits in the event of an employee's demise during employment. Not only death, PTD, TPD, and 5 kind of benefits. Even when an employee is unable to work due to injury, means temporary total disablement, the policy covers their monthly wage until they return to the workforce. And the employer might have to pay fines and penalties for not having a workmen's compensation policy, which can be expensive for the businesses. Ultimately, if he is not having the policy, the entire money or the entire outgo, whatever is decided as per the Employers' Compensation Act 1923, have to go out of his own pocket. So this is basically a social security policy, because this act, what is known as the Employees' Compensation Act 1923, is one of the social security legislations. And in compliance thereto, the policy introduced by the insurers is known as the Employees' Compensation Insurance. That policy again provides the social security to the workers. How it provides? It aims at providing financial protection to workmen and their dependents in case of accidental injury by means of payment of compensation by the employer. Means during the working hours, if there is any accidental injury, the compensation will be paid financially to the worker, either or in case of his death to his dependents. So this is providing only the financial protection, and that financial protection is known as the social security. So with the passage of time, the Act has seen many major amendments. Most important of them is the compensation amount, which is calculated with the applying the age and its wage, means as per the recent amendment that the wage level is increased to 15,000 per month. When this act was formulated, the wage was in hundreds. After a long time, that was increased to 4,000 rupees. Again, over a period of time, that was increased to 8,000. And recently in 2000, it was announced to 15,000 per month. because this wage level is the major component of the calculation of compensation to the worker or to his dependents. As far as name of the policy is concerned, earlier it was known as the Workmen Compensation Policy, because the Act was also known as the Workmen Compensation Act 1923. Now, since it is known as the Employees Compensation Act, so it has become Employees Compensation Insurance Policy. But surprisingly, this act is more than 100 years old, and it is continuing. Continuing because this is a social security legislation. It provides compensation to the workers, to the employees, to the labor, or to their dependents. Why it is? Why it is so? Because there is a section called Section 17. That Section 17 provides a right to the employee or to the worker or to the labor to recover compensation from the employer or from the contractor in case of any injury, death or disability. So as of date, if somebody is calling to you and asking for a policy which is known as the employees compensation, or in other words, workman compensation, don't get confused, because both are the same things. With the change of name of the act, simultaneously the name of the policy also has been changed. So how it provides the relief, that is important to understand. Because the act provides the provision of the compensation to the workman or to his dependents if the workman is dead or disabled due to accident arising out of and in the course of employment. This is the legal terminology which defines the canvas of the liability of the employer or the insurance company. How it is? It must be due to accident arising out of and in the course of employment. This terminology is the most important, because in most of the cases the injury or the disability or the death could be out of working hours, out of the course of the employment. In that case, the employer or the insurer cannot be held responsible to pay the compensation. So the foundation is within the course of employment. Now, what are those circumstances when the accident can happen? Normally, in workplace of the factories, industries, offices, this happens due to the negligence of the employer, one reason, not sole, or the negligence of the employee, second, negligence of the fellow employees, third, breach of statutory regulations, for example, Factory Act, and failure to provide a safe place of work by the employer. These are the most common reasons attributing or contributing to the accident during the working hours. And because any of them, the worker or the labor or the employee can suffer any kind of injury, disability or death, the employer is responsible to pay the compensation under all these circumstances, because that is a statutory liability. Now the question is, when it is called as accident? So as per legal terminology, any event which is neither expected nor designed means it is untoward, means it cannot be planned, means it is not the certain, unexpected. Anything, any time can happen. But if it is in the course of employment, then only there is a coverage of the policy. It indicates the time when the injury is caused. If it is out of employment, that refers and establishes the causal connection between the injury and the employment. So out of employment does not provide any coverage. In the course of employment is covered very much under the policy. Now, when the employer's liability arises, if the liability arises, the employer has to compensate the employee or the worker who has suffered an accident arising out of and in the course of employment. But what is the liability? When it is, under what circumstances, what are those factors which are covered under the policy? And these are only limited, four only. Death, permanent total disablement, permanent partial disablement, temporary disablement, or the last one is contracted an occupational disease. Now this is preferential. Some companies provide it as mandatory part of the liability, some provide it as a add-on or rider. But this is part of the policy. Anyhow, extra premium chargeable or not chargeable, but it has to be part of the policy and has to be covered by the employer or by the insurer. Now there are two aspects only related to this policy. One is how to calculate the premium, other is how to calculate the compensation. And only on these two pillars this policy stands on. Both are unique in nature because different to other policies. So while calculating the premium of the policy, you need four informations. All the four informations. None of them can be left. And what these four informations are? Total number of workers, laborers or employees. What is the salary or the wages of these employees per month? What is the period of insurance, number of months? And what is the nature of work? So these are the only four components of deciding the premium or calculating the premium. But the details related to each one of the four is must. Because if any factor is left out, premium cannot be calculated. Of course, first three informations will be provided by the proposer or the so-called insured. Because he is seeking the cover, he wants to obtain a policy from you. He will provide this basic detail, and on the basis of this detail, the premium of the policy will be calculated according to the nature of work. So the funda of calculation is number of employees or the workers into salary of wages of these employees per month into period of insurance and number of months. When this sum is worked out, then according to nature of work, the premium rate is applied. So the rating depends on nature of work. This policy is in fact one policy of the liability section. Employers or employees compensation insurance is a liability insurance policy. So in case of liability insurance policy, the premium rate is decided according to its tariff. So rating depends on the nature of work. The tariff is there. Funda is you need four kind of different informations. Once you got all these informations, you can apply the premium rate out of the tariff on the sum received out of the multiplication of first three. The premium rate can be discounted, that is as per the insurer, because what is the rate today, this is not necessarily to be applied according to the tariff just because the market is price free. Every insurer has got a right to apply the rate according to its wishes, because every insurer is responsible to its profitability. And ultimately, the rating applied by the insurance companies for any particular product is directly hitting their profits, or you can say to their balance sheets. So companies are more cautious in applying the premium rates, every company. So this is premium rate now according to the tariff. But how this is applicable? First three things have to be multiplied, then according to the nature of work, the rate has to be applied. Now the question is, how the rate is taken? Say for example, the tariff says, or an example is, a contractor has the farmhouse, or a principal has the farmhouse. And farmhouse, that some agriculture or plantation work is done. But for that purpose, he has had 10 workers. All those 10 workers are engaged in agricultural activities. But the owner or the principal understands the law of the land. He understands the importance of insurance. He knows if anything happened to any of these 10 workers, the liability will be on his shoulders. And whatever is the compensation decided according to the Employee Compensation Act, that amount has to be paid by him out of his pocket. And that amount is not less. That is based on these certain factors. Neither a rupee can be increased nor can be decreased. So when you are aware of this kind of situation, you would definitely like to transfer this risk to the insurance company in lieu of certain amount of premium. Because this is a statutory liability, you cannot avoid it. So the best way out of the risk management is, why don't you transfer this liability to the insurance company in lieu of certain amount of premium and take an insurance policy. In case any incident is happening during the policy period, any worker is suffering any injury, disability or death, pay the compensation according to the provisions of the Act. But don't pay it out of your pocket. Let the insurance company pay this amount. So you have taken a policy, employer's compensation insurance policy. Now when you ask for the details of these four factors, so the principal provided the detail. Number of employees 10, salary of these employees say 10,000 per month, period of insurance 1 year, that is 12 months. All three things are multiplied. Then ask the nature of work. Nature of work is agriculture. So the insurance company applied the rate according to the tariff, and the tariff says the rate applicable to the agriculture farm is only 5.85 per milli. So on the sum calculated out of the multiplication of all these first three things, the rate applied 5.85 and the premium is calculated. So simple. This is one example. You can take many examples. But the methodology will remain the same. Reason being, unless all the four factors are available, you cannot calculate the premium. Take another example, a big example of any industry. Say suppose some 200 workers are there. Out of that, 180 are unskilled workers. They are paid only 10,000 rupees per month. But only 20 are skilled workers. They are paid 15,000 per month. So for 200 workers of a factory which is manufacturing the aerated water, the premium rate applicable is only 15.10 per milli, that is 15.10 per milli. So once you calculated all these things, you can apply the rate. So this is the method of calculating the basic rate. Now so far you have understood how the basic rate shall be applicable on this policy. Now there are three extensions of the policy, three add-on covers of the policy. And the first one is most important, that is called medical expenses. Fortunately, for selecting medical expenses, there is a limitation which has to be selected by the proposer. And that limit starts from 5,000 rupees to unlimited, or to the limit of actual expenses. Because this they will provide that policy may extend on the following scale to provide for the payment of medical, surgical, and hospital expenses, including cost of transportation. But the extra premium has to be paid because this is an add-on cover. An additional premium starts from 30% subject to minimum 80 rupees per person, even if the limit selected is 5,000 rupees per worker. If it is selected 5 lakh rupees per worker per year, premium would be 125% of the premium table and minimum 650 per persons. And even wider canvas is required for medical expenses because normally medical expenses are the thing which is required during the policy period. Number of workers may suffer injuries. So in that case, if the actual reimbursement of medical expenses is required, in that case 150% of the premium, that is 700 rupees per person, has to be charged per worker. So sometimes this may happen that the premium of medical expenses may exceed the premium of the policy. It depends upon the number of workers and the limit selected by the principal. So this is the first, and this should be advised. Whoever is taking the policy, it should be advised that you go for the medical expenses. Why? Because the policy does not provide the coverage of medical expenses. What policy coverage is provided under the policy? This is only for these things: death, permanent total disablement, permanent partial disablement, temporary disablement, total disablement, or the occupational disease. So when you know that medical expenses are not payable and you want the coverage for that, coverage is available, of course, but only thing is additional premium is to be paid. Second one is extension for compensation for occupational disease. So this is again covered under the policy, but on the additional premium of 50% of the book rate. Typically, the occupational disease could be varied in nature because it depends upon the particular nature of the work of the worker. Because sometimes workers are continuously doing the same kind of work for a couple of years because they are hired for that. A welder will do the welding, a fitter will do the fitting, an electrician will do the electric work. So related to their particular profession, there could be professional diseases. Those are called occupational diseases. And because of that nature of work, they may suffer at times, like skin diseases, hearing impairment, lung infection. Had they not engaged in that kind of work, they would be doing something else. Maybe they may not have suffered with this disease. But because of the occupation, continuously doing the same for a couple of years, it may cause certain kind of diseases which are known as the occupational disease. So there is a provision to cover that extension is there to cover those diseases. And one more extension is there. That is ensures liability for contractors or subcontractors employees. Sometimes it also happens, you must have got a proposal also and you are no better knows because you are in the field, you are getting everyday request. That the contractor may have 2-3 projects. He alone cannot handle it, so he must have some team. Team may have the workers and the subcontractors as well. So he is ultimately responsible for the liabilities relating to the workers. So he would definitely prefer to cover all those projects or those workers who are working under him or under his subcontractor. So if we want that kind of extension, that can be provided. But the only condition is the detail of the worker and the number of the worker should be correct. As per muster roll, as per wage roll. It should be tallied at the time of taking the policy as well as at the time of taking the claim, if anything happens. Because these are the two factors, number of workers and wage of the workers, which are also contributing in calculation of premium. Without this detail, the premium cannot be calculated. So the contractor must not hide this detail. If at all he is trying to hide, the purpose of taking this policy is defeated. Because under no circumstances the insurance company will pay the claim if it is found at the time of claim that the detail given by the contractor was false. Number of workers was not correct, wages paid was not correct, because the muster roll and the wage rolls were required at the time of claim, not at the time of taking the policy. At that time, of course, they were not seen. But at the time of claim, the record is there before the insurance company, and on the basis of the detailed claim will be settled. Not only, even if the award is decided by the Commissioner of Workmen's Compensation Court, still he will look for that detail. So if the correct information is there is no harm in giving this extension also. So these are the three extensions available, plus basic rates. So once the basic rate is calculated, plus the premium of these three extensions are calculated or added, the premium of the policy is given. So that is first part of the policy. Coming to the second part, that is the claim, how the claim will be settled, if anything happens during the policy, how the claim will be settled. That is most important to understand. Because to calculate the compensation, you need only three things. While to calculate the premium, you required four things, but for compensation only three things are required. And out of that, the first two informations are already available with you, because that is nature of injury, that employer will tell what has happened to the worker, monthly wages, what he is paying to that worker, and the relevant factor. The relevant factor is specified in Schedule 4 of the working out the lump sum amount of compensation. This relevant factor is the most important aspect of calculating the compensation. What is this? I will show you the table, and then you will understand. But the most important aspect of this is that there is no distinction between an adult and a minor worker with respect to the amount of compensation. That means even if the worker is less than 18 years of age, or even if the worker is more than 16 years of age, 60 years of age, he or his dependents are still entitled for the compensation. Today you may say this is in violation of the Factories Act or Workers Act, that a person of less than 18 years is hired by the employer. Why the insurance company should pay the compensation? No, that is not the case. Insurance company has to pay the compensation because if the employer has hired a person less than 18 years of age, the action against him is under the different law, because that is a criminal act. So criminal action would be there against him. But it doesn't mean the liability can be escaped. As a person has died, suffered any body parts, he, or in case of his death, his dependents must be paid the compensation as per the law. So that cannot be escaped. That is the reason they say that there is no distinction between an adult and minor with respect to the amount of compensation. And this relevant factor is this one. There are two tables. One for death and the other for permanent total disablement. So for death, say this is the table. It starts from 16 years to 65 years. Lower is the age, higher is the compensation. Higher is the age, lower is the compensation. This is an example taken of 15,000 rupees per month per case. So suppose say 35 years is the age, 15,000 rupees per month is the wage. The relevant factor would be 197.06. and the compensation would be 14,77,950. So this is already calculated, you just have to pick up. But it differs according to the wage. This is the example of 50,000 base. Similarly, in case of permanent total disablement, the compensation in case of permanent total disablement would be rather higher, because in case of death, the one-time compensation is paid to the dependents of the worker. But here, in case of permanent total disability, the worker is still alive. He may have lost his body parts, he may not be able to work, but still he needs the money for his survival. So the compensation amount is required much higher. Here the relevant factor would be a little higher, and the compensation amount would also be higher. Here the maximum limit of compensation is 20,56,860, while in case of death the maximum compensation payable is 17,14,050. So this is the relevant factor table which is applicable to all the people according to the age and the wage. And the formula for the death is 50% of the monthly wages of the diseased workman multiplied with the relevant factor. Very simple. Act also says that minimum compensation in case of death is 1,20,000. You calculate the compensation with the formula that 50% of the monthly wages with the relevant factor you multiply it. That's all. But in case of permanent total disability, you have to multiply with it 60% of the monthly wages. Here the minimum compensation payable is only 1,40,000. That is the difference. And this is when the permanent total disability is there are certain categories. But a medical certificate is required, certifying that the person has suffered permanent total disability. Even certain diseases like loss of limbs, loss of eyesight, paralysis, they are also coming under the category of permanent total disability. So how the that compensation is calculated? That's simple. The way how the compensation amount will be calculated, it all depends upon the monthly wages and the multiplication with the relevant factor. So now simply, once a worker is dying during the course of employment, take his age and wages and just multiply it with the relevant factor. Say for example, a person of 46 years died during the working hours. So according to the table, the relevant factor is 46. For 46 is 166.29. 166.29. 50% compensation is payable of the wages. So if the wages is 15,000, it is multiplied with the 7,500 into 166.29. And the amount payable is 12,47,175. Under no circumstances the maximum compensation for death can be more than 17.14 lakh. In case of PTD, or permanent total disablement, under no circumstances it can exceed 20,56,860. But this amount is also a big one. Suppose 2 or 3 instances are happening in a year, the employer has to pay that much of compensation to the dependents. That would be a very heavy burden. So if the policy is not taken by the employer, he has to pay it out of his pocket. Take another example. Say suppose a shopkeeper who is having a peon of 30 years, paying to him only 3,000. He died during the working hours due to accident. How the compensation will be calculated? Minimum compensation is 1,20,000, but as first priority is to calculate the compensation. 50% of the monthly wages means 1,500. Relevant factor of the age is 207.98. Compensation payable is 3,11,970. So this is still higher than the 1,20,000. Means this is payable. And the simple variation in this is, suppose the worker has not died, but he has lost both his hands or legs he has suffered permanent total disability. So same procedure will remain here, except that 50% will become 60%. So in that case, 1800 into 207.98, whatever comes, that compensation is paid. So the methodology is very simple. Nature of injury, monthly wages of the workman, relevant factor, there is no distinction according to the age. Lower and higher limit both are decided. In case of death, 50% formula, minimum compensation 1,20,000, maximum 17,140. In case of permanent total disablement, 60% formula of the monthly wages, minimum compensation 1,40,000, maximum 20 lakh something. So that limit is there, and there cannot be any variation. But of course, the doctor's report will certify whether it's a permanent total disablement, it's a permanent partial disablement, or it's a temporary disablement. Compensation for partial disablement would be according to the percentage certified by the doctor. And this percentage could be 5% or it could be 95%. It depends upon the severity of the accident, how much the worker has suffered. We are not going deep into the percentage of the body parts, because this is the part of doctors, medical science. They will decide and they will certify. We are only concerned with the certificate. That certificate will decide that how much percentage of disability is there. Only on that basis we have to pay the compensation. But the compensation has to be deposited with the commissioner. And the commissioner is the authority who will issue the sufficient proof of discharge of the employer's liability. In case of temporary disablement, temporary means it can be recovered by proper cure or treatment. So in that case, the compensation paid is only limited, and that is equal to 25% of the monthly wages. So that is also fixed as per the WC Act. Now the only thing is, rate chart is provided, calculator is provided, exclusion list is also there, where majorly three exclusions are there. Mainly on those grounds the claims are excluded. These are known as 3Ds. Drink or drugs. 1. Disobedience, that is willfully disobeying the orders of the employer. 3rd, disregard, that is willfully disregarding the safety measures provided by the employer. Because workers may be in the mines, on the mountains, and with the machines. So the employers are providing the safety devices. If they are not using and disregarding willfully, employer may say, we are not responsible. They are not using the proper safety devices. They are disregarding. So in that case, becomes difficult. Maybe the commissioner can bound the employer to pay the compensation, but of course insurance company can deny the liability on these grounds. So here again the natural death is not covered. If a worker died during the working hours without an accident, means within natural death, no general insurance company covers under any of the policies the natural death of a worker. This kind of loss is covered only under the life insurance policies. So natural death is not covered. Now this is our decline list. You please don't work on this kind of proposals, otherwise your proposal may not be accepted by the underwriting department, because these are the risks which are exclusively given in our decline list. Workers working on a very long heights, working undergrounds and areas prone to landslide and floodings, manual labor in or around water, metal forges foundries, blasting and tunneling, chemical industries, or where there the employees' state insurance scheme is already applicable. In that case, the proposal may not be considered. Normally, documents required for claim are simple. Claim for medical certificate, wage certificate, proof of age. But in case, because the accidental liability is covered only, so the FIR, Panchanama and MLC can also be asked for. Disability certificate is required. So your target segment for this policy are contractors, labor contractors, shops, factories, labor associations, factory inspectors. They are your target segments. So this is all about the employees compensation insurance. Now if you have any questions, you can ask me. Any doubts? Any doubts, any questions related to product? No doubts? Okay, please see your mails and confirm to me if you have received the. Please go ahead.